Mid-2671, Atraxis System. Champion Tukari, continued. Having arrived, Tukari and company exited the compound's entrance that led to the landing platform, and before them, 2 shuttles were present with their doors open. Paired with the long-gone sandstorm, they were now welcome to a bright blue sky, slowly changing its color in tandem with the sun. If not for their present situation, Tukari would have loved to take a moment to at least take in the scene. But as quickly as they arrived, they embarked on the shuttles with the doors closing with a hiss before pressurizing, and with a rise in their stomachs, they had lifted off into orbit. After boarding, the scientists were given rooms to settle for the moment while Tukari sorted out how best to lead them to safety. As she arrived on the bridge, she was met with 2 enthusiastic individuals, the first being Niji, and the second being the normally calm and collected Karu. "So, what did you find, and can we track them?" Karu said first, while Niji simply offered a greeting. "Welcome back, Lady Tukari," he said with fervor. She raised a scowl and growled at the mention of being named a lady when she felt far from it. It was enough to cease his advance, with him returning to his station. She smiled, appreciative of his obedience. She then turned back to Karu, who awaited for her response. But she looked around the bridge filled with Yunni drones and felt unease. For as much as she knew, they were agents of the Union and couldn't be trusted, at least not when operations were involved with Neela's name on them. She took this chance to move to a more secured location. She just didn't happen to know one that might not have been rigged to keep an eye on them, so she inquired silently with Niji on the subject. Oh, for classified briefings, correct? Don't worry, I have developed a room free from intervention. Some of the workers back home insisted it be done, but every ship needs a quiet room, replied Niji. Then may we use that room? We have matters of import to discuss. So if you would, she trailed off, hoping for him to catch her understanding. He nodded with understanding and offered her the location, situated not far from the bridge, but sat just 1 level down. She and Karu then departed for the room, finding it within a hall of several other doors on the sides that led to larger conference-styled rooms with some having a holographic platform projector, similar to what was equipped on their combat shuttle prior. However, the room they enter was covered with dark grey panels and black tempered glass floors. There was naught of a table in sight, but outlines in the floor indicated that such furnishings lifted from the floor. She then turned to Karu, who still awaited her response. After she was done observing the room, with no apparent indication they were being watched, she replied, "It was a facility used for a breeding program commissioned by Neela. I suspect to ultimately replace the Legion forces with a substitute force for something bigger. I'm just not exactly sure what for." Karu mulled over her words for little more than a minute before responding, "It's likely preparations for war, and I suspect the Terrans and Celian remnants, but I'm not sure. The scientist we were told to meet mentioned something about freeing us," she replied, but Karu's eyes widened at her apparent lack of realization. "Then it must be for the Masters," he said, causing Tukari to share an exasperated countenance paired with shock. For her, to battle the Masters was a death sentence, and she still wondered how the Celians even did so 25 cycles ago. "How? Mistress Neela may oversee the legions, but she has little control over the flag unions. Each known Yunni brood has already sworn a fealty to the Masters like no other, and if they hear of treason, they would be the first to alert flag forces," she said with an untamed and hopeless expression. "It would mean the destruction of not just the mistress, but our people as a whole." But Karu motioned his hands in a calm manner as he replied, "Do you know why we have Niji with us?" She nodded, stating that it was for testing the ships he had built, as was Kiralan culture. "Wrong. There's no Kiralan shipbuilder who departs on a ship they made. They just continue working on to the next project. But not him." "Then why?" "Surely the Yunni were bred with a loyalty for the Masters. They work aboard their ships," she answered. "They see, hear, and smell for their lords." "I think it might be best for the mistress herself to tell you," he said, offering a slight bow, and left, leaving Tukari in the darkened room. What manifested were a small series of lights on the other end of the room, before ultimately coming together into a small form that sat upon a chair. Her clothes were neat and plentiful, like layers of ornately decorated blankets. She had serene eyes, like that of a nurturing mother. Then she spoke with soft words that rang throughout Tukari, like a comforting air that enveloped her. Before her was not her mistress, nor as the master of the legions. Before her was a mother. "Mother," she said aloud, almost subconsciously, while offering a customary kneel before her. "Rise, my daughter. What news do you bring?" she said, still with an air of domination, yet foregone by her soft voice. Tukari stood as she was instructed, meeting the gaze of Neela. "We have investigated what we could, but the slaves and most of the research was either taken or destroyed, save for the results harboured by Nesca," answered Tukari. Neela's eyes grew wide at the mention. "Nesca lives? Then even with research lost, it would seem we can recover and resume the program. I pray you have treated him well," said Neela. Tukari was flustered for a moment, recalling the moment she almost drove her blade through him for supposed cowardice. She was thankful she didn't. "Yes, and it appears he has done an experiment of his own accord involving another Vixian," answered Tukari. Even she was nervous to reveal the information, but she was not one to hide from her mother with these sorts of matters, as well as incapable to see beyond possible repercussions in the future, since she hated to think beyond simple matters. "What has he done?" asked Neela, curiosity plaguing her face as she leaned in from her seat. "It appears he has fallen in love with a scientist by the name of Alluri. She is with child, possibly a litter, but we don't know for sure until they visit a clinic station," replied Tukari. Neela then placed her hand on her chin, caressing it in careful contemplation before speaking once more. "Interesting. A Vixian to give birth by union with a Celian. Then his testing is complete. This will make great strides for plans moving forward. I'll send you coordinates of where I want them, along with their colleagues," replied Neela. But before she could cease communication, Tukari interjected, causing Neela to pause. With a weighted sigh, Tukari inquired, "What purpose do you have for these programs, and what of the Yunni that run my fleet? Are they not loyalists to the masters? Because I find these matters of which you provide me may be contrary to their loyalties of the masters. I wish to know, mother." Neela sat back in her chair, silently observing her daughter before offering her an explanation. Instead, she decided to test her with a series of questions of loyalty. "Then let me ask, who do you serve, the Union or to your people?" Tukari thought it to be a simple question, but before she could answer, Neela turned to a sharp glare, and with a swift tongue usurped her daughter's response with her own. "I am not a choice that I've given you," said Neela, causing Tukari to pause before she could let out a word. "Think carefully." Then she thought to herself, did she not serve Neela, her mistress of life and structure? If she did not fight for Neela, then did she fight for the masters of the Union? She mulled over it heavily as the answer didn't come immediate, so she was at a loss. "Forgive me, but I have always believed I fought for you, and through you. I fought for the Union to maintain stability and security for our den worlds. Is that wrong?" Tukari replied solemnly, uncertain if her reply had caused Neela's ire, but it never came. Instead, sorrow filled the room. "No, my dear Tukari," she replied with a solemn expression, with a countenance that yearned for freedom, but was restrained by powers beyond her own. "For so long I have led us so that we can maintain security and stability for our worlds, but that's all it is, mere security at the cost of our freedoms. Tell me, what are the Vixians to the Union?" Tukari stood silent at her mother's words, then answered after several seconds of simple deliberation. "Warriors." The tone then shifted from her motherly tone to one of anger for not just her daughter, but for her people of whom she ruled over. It was passionate, and Neela's heart bled for the status of which her race was reduced to. "That's right. We are the warriors who maintain the security for all the original Union members, the Yunni, Yavari, Kiralian, even the Toscans and Runians. But what about us? The world I birthed you on is one of many that will only offer one service, the propagation of warriors for the masters. But soon, that will cease to be the case. But I need those slaves for that to work, do you understand? Tukari lowered her head at the question and replied, "Of course, Mother. But I have come to a dead end. We have the names of 2 assailants, and have successfully translated them, but they mean nothing to us without some kind of reference. We suspect they may have once been upon one of the many Toscan ships that arrived from Celian space. I request your guidance on this matter." She kept her head lowered as she answered, awaiting Neela's reply, which came sooner than she expected. "Seek Grellus Brine of the Porters Guild. They are independent of the Union, but have a long history of servitude alongside us. They are the ones we sent at the War Council's request. They may have the answers you seek." Tukari then thanked her mother by way of a customary kneel and lowering of her head. "Thank you, Mother. I shall find these marauders and ensure they submit. I have high hopes for you, as well as your search. As for the Yunni aboard your vessel," she paused, letting her words marinate for dramatic effect. "I had saved a forgotten brood from destruction some time ago, and as such they owe me their lives for generations to come. They will be loyal to us and no other." "Be well, my daughter," replied Neela with a small snicker before cutting the call, leaving Tukari alone in the room. She then felt a hotness about her face. She was flustered. She didn't think she had mentioned her quest parallel to what she was doing now, so her mother's suggestion had taken her off guard. "I best carry on then," she said before leaving the room for the bridge. As she mentioned before to Nesca, she would return them deeper into Union territory, but by order of her mistress, it was to be away from the eyes of the Union. The system she was given coordinates was partway into Union space, but bordered between it and the unknown regions. It was given a larger force of Neela loyalist ships, as indicated by the many icons present on the large holographic display centered on the bridge. Beside her, Nesca and his beloved Alluri stood by as Niji and Karu worked over details for a future mission. "How are the ship's armaments? Will they be sufficient for the future ahead?" asked Karu, to which Niji replied with an attitude of confidence. "Of course. I have optimized energy input for maximum power, and any excess power can be stored and used for a follow-up shot. However, it will need a small cooldown to maintain that function," explained Niji. As they continued their back-and-forth conversation ranging from weapons systems to tactics, Nesca decided to try his hand with Tukari, who, until now, sat quietly as they travelled to their new destination. "Champion Tukari, if I may," he began. In response, she gave a shallow nod, granting him authorization to continue speaking. "I'm sorry if this may be a bit presumptuous, but I take it you are looking for a mate, correct?" Her ears flickered at the mention, but she had since tried to hold back lashing out when outside members speak on her personal matters, even if she was the one to speak of it aloud in the beginning. "I am. Why?" she said with a frank tone and gave a sidelong glance to the Celian beside her. "Then why not Karu? Or perhaps that older warrior, Kutaru? Are they not suitable, given their positions and experience?" he asked in more detail, to which she shook her head side to side. "Karu is smart, and to be designated as a bridge commander is an honor, but not by my standards," she said. Nesca felt there was more to the reason and questioned her about it. "Then why?" he asked. "Because I've already tried, by trial of submission. He was too weak and unskillful in the art of combat, that it had put a damper on my future prospect. And Kutaru, well, he is already father to many warriors with many lower-class vixens. Has Alluri not mentioned how we choose our mates?" said Tukari, making a glance to the silent individual in question. "Bits and pieces, but I've not read up on your culture very much. Only what Alluri has told me," replied Nesca. Tukari then stared at the now flustered Alluri, urging her to explain. "How is it that you two became intertwined?" she said, alluding to something much more obvious. That allusion had caused Alluri to fidget with her tail behind Nesca, with himself growing green in the face. "Fine, I'll tell you," began Tukari. "In our culture, the strong sires with the weaker of the two, and from that union, the latter will become a den mother for the father's clan, all of which fall under the leadership of Neela. I cannot sire children, only bear them. That is why I wish to find a mate stronger than myself. And no, I will not willingly submit to one obviously weaker than myself. It would only produce a litter unworthy of my class, and I will not produce failures for the mistress's legion." It was a lot for Nesca to let marinate in his mind, but as he turned to Alluri for verification of truth, she nodded, confirming what he had doubted. "I take it, she tried to make you fight for it, but ended with her submitting paws and stomach up? My, how romantic! I didn't think you had it in you, that warrior's spirit," Tukari added with a touch of suggestive allure, causing the two to blush even more. With Nesca, he recalled the moment leading up to their night together. It was over the completion of their virility serum, that it was Alluri who had come onto him, offering a bout of combat, remembering that she had told him it was customary in their species to initiate a bout of combat over great accomplishments, and that his history as a Celian trooper made him a prime candidate. They had fought, and he remembered struggling, but fearing to lose had overturned her strength onto herself, causing her to submit. Thereafter, he remembered the great night he had, following his victory. "Wait, I thought you said it was customary to challenge an opponent to a fight after a success of some kind. It was just to test my strength," he said with a green and flustered face, to which Alluri did little to deny the claim, adding to its authenticity. Tukari snickered at the reveal, which caused Alluri to hang her head in embarrassment from the revelation. "I'm sorry I tricked you, but you really did win," she apologized, clearly upset at having lied to her significant other, but instead of being angry, he placed a hand atop her head as he held her close. "It's fine, after all, I'm going to be a father," he exclaimed to the bridge, causing all, even the Yunni, to turn to the pair. "That's enough, but the least I can offer is congratulations. Neela will ensure you two are cared for, by the way." She directed her attention to Karoo, who had still been absorbed in the holodisplay as it showed the planet they were to be in orbit of. "Have you made contact with the facility?" asked Tukari. "Of course. They have a landing platform with our name on it, and they will meet the scientist once they land. They also requested your presence," answered Karoo. "Very well. I had intended to at least see off our new friends, along with future warriors of Neela," she said with a hearty laugh. She then directed the Nesca and Alluri down to the hangar, where the scientists waited with their belongings. "Is this all of you?" she questioned, ensuring that all were present and that no one was going to be left behind, since she hated wasting trips, since it took a lot of her time that she could have spent doing something else. Alluri nodded, with Tukari sneaking a glance at her stomach, which has grown larger than since she last saw. Although it was just several weeks of travel, it was enough for her children to develop quickly. "This is all of us, champion. We're ready to depart."